was sailing, it was at the dock for a while.
Yes.
And while it was at the dock, some filmmakers, and part of what Christopher Nolan was talking about was the idea of choice.
Yes.
That the idea of producers saying, look, we are not going to use film to go make this, tell this story.
Yes.
Because it's too expensive, you would be told. Or if you would use this medium on the scale in terms of a Hollywood picture, digital hadn't reached the photochemical gold standard with
Right.
latitude, resolution, color, all of those kinds of aspects to the image. And so there was a pushback, from some, and the idea that film is disappearing. And so in 2010, the Red camera, though it was out, wasn't there yet. The Alexa was just coming out. And so there was this, so some directors were being forced to use a medium that wasn't as good.
Yes.
And at the same time, we were seeing a transition in terms of the documentary or the role of the cinematography. That's also an extension that was changing. And I guess, people were losing their jobs. The whole structure.
That I did not know.
Well, in the sense of, what that's developed then now is, color timers.
Mm-hmm.
All of the people that were done in terms of the post of traditional film. Everyone involved in, Technicolor's business has changed. Fuji's not making film. They're not making film cameras. I guess I'm kind of moving along a broad timeline here. But in the early days, which would be 2000, the end of the early days, 2010, this idea of just, the end of film, the end of something that we were using for 100 years to tell a story, and now it might be gone.
But it will lead to greater inventions. There always will be artists. And an artist will find, there'll always be product, which has to go into theaters. But there will be artists that find ways to do, and you know what's going to happen. In 10 years, someone will make a movie, they'll find 35 film and make a movie, or 70 millimeter, and it will be Jesus coming off the cross. It will be, someone's made a 35 millimeter film, and maybe there'll be a renaissance for a while. But, years ago, I think the first worldwide press tour I did was on St. Elmo's Fire, and I remember going to Japan for the first time, and Sony was already experimenting with an entirely digital theater. You probably saw it a long, long time ago, because even though we're many different generations apart, we kind of started around the same time, actually. But of course, what was bad about the theater ran on a computer. It's a little odd, but the film was terrible. It wasn't worth it because the resolution was so bad.
Right.
But things happen. I remember when Mike Figgis did Leaving Las Vegas. And Andre, do you remember, was that 16 or Super 16? Do you remember?
Super 16.
Super 16, thank you.
Shot at Declan Clay.
Yeah, Declan. And I know that was like a miracle, people thought, because someone had dared to do it. But it actually was perfect for that film, and it worked. And I think that people have misused all of it. I really do. I think that, and I'm probably guilty of some of it myself, but
No.
you can misuse, you can misuse the wrong instrument at the wrong time, and then you kind of pay for it. But I think it has to keep growing because, there will be an historic film made on someone's phone. You know that that's coming, and it may not look like anything that you thought about when you were a kid in film, but they won't have thought about those films. And one of the things that works me up to your film was, you know, there is the storing of these great films, but you have to know about those films and then find a way to get to them to see it, and who's going to run it for you. And, you know, there will be festivals, but they'll only pick a few films, and that worries me. And if they're not put onto digital on some form,
Yeah.
and you know, Blu-ray will become something even greater.
Blu-ray is Blu-ray. I mean, that's not even great.
No.
It's great for your TV.
Yes, but it'll grow. It'll grow. They'll all grow. And I can't believe, you know, I mean, there are a couple of people on the film, it's like the world has ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't kind of see it that way. People felt that way when natural acting came, because it was sort of the end of, you know,
Acting.
grand acting,
Grand
right?
acting.
And certainly in the '60s when Easy Rider came along, and certainly Taxi Driver, and you know, many of those breakthrough films, it was like the world is ending, the world is ending, the world is ending, and it didn't.
Well,
It began.
So you share no nostalgia then for Emulsion?
Oh, I do. I love all. I grew up behind a movie theater, and I grew up on all those movies. That, you know, the golden days of Hollywood, and also Europe. You know, during the neorealism from Italy, and you know, the great French cinema.
Right. So the cinema, the storytelling's not ending, but that medium is becoming. I mean, that idea of, I mean, just watching a film,
Mm-hmm.
the emotion itself, that experience, whatever that feeling is, you have no, just that particular tool. We're talking, if we're going to explain, if we're going to use that as a, you know, film as a tool, then you have no nostalgia for it. It's like, thanks for showing up for 100 years, your time is done, see you later. It doesn't matter for anybody to have to experience.
Well, I love. I like to watch film from many eras, but when I watch something that I saw as a kid in black and white, especially noir, for instance, there's no way I could see that movie except for doing it with a DVD,
Right.
you know, with a Blu-ray. And then there are a lot of people that are now watching on the internet, as your film says, and also on their computers. And because I think the way people are working and trying to struggle so much all over the world, that people don't always have the time or money to get to a movie theater, and you know, the prices keep going up, and they have to watch movies. I mean, my point of view as a storyteller and as a director is, you know, we all know how hard it is to make a movie. I believe anyone who finishes a movie should get the Academy Award. I want someone to see what we did. Any way they see it. Of course, The Matrix, you want to see the first Matrix exactly the way the Wachowskis meant it to be seen. But many people who don't know where that's playing or can't find it.
Right. So do we go to, from there, do we go to archival, or do we talk about the new audience, or do we talk about democratization? Do we talk about the means of production being available now? Do we talk about, where do we go from here? In the sense, where do we talk about the new audience? What do you think about the impact of storytelling to the digital age? If we have, it seems to be now that this, you know, it's in a very exciting time, right? I mean, the means of production, you know, everyone, you know, the quality of what you can now have in your hand for the amount of money. You know, you can have a really, you can, you know, 2K cameras, 2K camera, but I mean, you can, you know, you can do a lot. Everyone can go out and make a film on the phone, on all sorts of ways. You can stream your movie, you can upload it, download it, share it. So, I mean, it's a very exciting time.
I think so. I think that we're always moving forward. Certainly with technology. I'm not sure as long as people are still killing people that we're not out of the dark ages. However, that's another discussion for another time. But certainly with technology, we've always been moving forward. I mean, there are people who miss talking on the phone all day.
What are you talking about? Not only can you talk on the phone, you can text on the phone,
That's
you
what
can
I mean.
video on the phone.
I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm sure you have this with your agent. I do. We don't have to play phone tag anymore.
No, you just send it.
And thank God for all my godchildren, because now I can abbreviate almost anything in the world. And someone will understand it, because I can't spell. Not a joke.
So, how is storytelling changing? In terms of, we have the big screen, we have smaller, we have webisodes, we have people doing kind of improvisational, there's kinds of new ways, we have shorter stories, we have serialization, we have gaming is taking on a whole other, multiple endings, multiple role playings.
And yet there are really good movies every year. There still are really good movies every year. One of the problems, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but in our business, certainly in California and the studio system right now, it's easier to make a big film that could be a blockbuster, or an independent film for $1, $2, or $3 million, which you never know is going to get distribution or advertising, and than it is to make what used to be the mainstay of film, which was really good adult fare, drama, thrillers that aren't horror films, which I love horror films, and there's certainly great ones made, but that sort of four people in a room talking, like a movie like Closer. Now, I'm sure people went to work for Mike Nichols because it's Mike Nichols, and maybe there was a back end. But, Hollywood, once Mark Cannon paid Jim Carrey $20 million to do Cable Guy.
Oh!
It changed our entire industry. And we all started to make much more money. Certainly the stars, definitely, and all the co-stars, and all the other parts. Everybody's scale went up. And so did directors, of course, and writers. And so suddenly, two people in a room talking was a $75 or $80 million movie. Well, that's not a good business to be in at all. And so you saw a shrinking of that, and it's still shrinking. Television, which everybody bitches about because of reality shows, but we have HBO, we have Showtime, we have other cable channels opening all the time, and actually, I think television, if you look for good television, it sometimes has greater storytelling, greater quality than some of the movies.
So that's a kind of serialization of it, in terms of, you're saying that now this content, more, can't say mature content, but you're saying that this kind of vacuum of this mid-range price film can now has gone into a kind of cable aspect.
Yes, but I think there will be people
So
fighting to
digital.
do those, that I'll come after you and say, could you take it back in and we'll make this cheap?
Right.
And then you can do those things, and we've seen successes. Phone booth, we made in 12 days. Colin was unknown at the time, and we did it for $1 million.
12 days?
Yeah, $1.5 million, $1.2 million. But we had Fox.
For distribution.
So we had the same advertising, the
Right.
same marketing as Lord of the Rings. So
Right.
that's what's missing when you do $1 million movie.
How do you get seen? How do you get
Well,
paid
hopefully
back?
festivals.
Right.
Sundance has done a lot to promote it. Certainly Toronto for years and years and years.
Right.
Tigerland and Phone Booth and Veronica Guerin for us really got discovered in Toronto, and that sort of, actually, Toronto made Colin a star by showing Tigerland at his festival, because that's when everyone saw him for the first time, the critics. So, yeah, there's always room. And, I mean, this is going to be so vulgar what I'm going to tell you. But
Everyone lean forward.
but I always say this to film schools and you know, and also to colleges and universities that come to see one of my films and people who want to get in the business. You know, there's a pyramid, and it's like the groupies who want to fuck the rock star. Okay?
Go
Well,
on.
you wouldn't know about this.
We've all been groupies.
We keep them locked up. And of course, there's armies and armies of these young ladies, and sometimes not so young, that want to achieve that. Well, they have to find a way, because they cannot just join the line. So, whatever it takes. And I remember when the Wachowskis, their passion in life was to make The Matrix. And no one understood the script at Warner Brothers except for Lorenzo, and obviously you did when you read it, or you took a chance. And, you know, they fought and fought and fought, and then Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who was the producer, fought and fought and fought, and I'm sure the initial budget was not that expensive, and then, you know, everybody was very glad they took that chance for obvious reasons. But, you know, they found a way, and everybody has to find their way, and you have to fight really, really hard, because I put a lot of unknowns in, and we just saw an American movie with all unknowns in it that was terrific casting, and I don't know how they got it made, but here it is at festivals, and it's gotten great critical acclaim. And I think that when we did Tigerland, we wanted it to be like we did it in old Bolexes, because we wanted to have that feeling of 1971.
That's a button now on a digital camera. It's called the Bolex button. You just put it on.
I have one too.
Yeah.
And the studio went crazy. I mean, we had to fight them every day because it wasn't a 35 millimeter film. But I mean, it's teenagers that have been, you know, drafted to go to Vietnam. And it was written by a man who lived it and fortunately came back. And it was appropriate to that subject matter, you know. But you have to fight very, very, very hard. And you can't let up for 1 second. And because our argument was, well, we're going to blow it up to 35 anyway. I mean, we're not going to show, you know, the 16 millimeter camera. And you have to believe in it so strongly that they know they don't know anything. They really know.
Yeah.
And they don't want to let on. So you have to pretend or believe so strongly and fight. And I think that where technology is concerned, and the subject you've been talking about so much, is it will keep moving forward. I loved what Fincher, I worked with David this summer, which was really fun, and what he said about getting the invention done overnight on the camera so he could do what he did, right? And because he was actually glorifying invention, is what he was saying. And Keanu's just directed his first feature in China, and it's called
Man of Tai Chi.
Man of Tai Chi. And was that 35 millimeter?
No, that was digital, sir. And a wonderful digital camera, studio camera.
It is a great camera. Well, that wraps it up, folks. No, I've only seen, I got a little view from our friends at Village Roadshow East of a couple of, you know, raw dailies, which they probably shouldn't have shown me, but they're so proud of it.
Yeah,
honestly.
thank you.
They're bragging about it all over the place. But of course, I saw it on a computer, on a desktop, and I mean, it really would.
Thank you very much.
You did a lot of theatrical things.
Yes. So, you're
So
saying
you can do that.
Yeah. So in terms of that pyramid, in terms of getting known, getting seen, we should be what? I mean, that's the kind of the Hollywood aspect of it. It's also, I mean, there's so many ways to get your film seen, but you still have to fight to get heard. You have to fight to somehow, and then there's the idea of how do you compete, right? I mean, there's the, you know, when you, yes, you can be seen, but how can you pay anybody? How can you earn a living from what you're doing, from your art?
That is a much different question. Yes, because a lot of these films, we all work for the lowest price that our unions will let us work for, or they'll throw us out. And then everybody's hoping for some kind of back end, or you realize you're never going to see a dime, and you do it for love. And we certainly never thought Phonebook was going to be a hit movie. I mean, it was sort of an experiment that we believed in. And you know, you get lucky. And then some movies.
So good luck.
But there's no formula. Everybody has to fight for themselves.
That's the thing. I think the formulas are changing. I mean, we're looking at, you know, in the States, you know, it's coming to Europe. We have the Netflix model, so thanks for that. Nothing. I mean, it's great for being able to watch movies, but for the artists who are creating them, there's not really an equitable compensation.
No.
Festivals are great to be seen, and you're kind of putting out, you know, that's a cooperation in terms of your work and also the chance for it to be seen. We have streaming formats now. You don't get paid for privacy, though you might get some cool things from your friends, like thanks for passing along that movie for free. So piracy doesn't quite do it. So how does it, what's going to happen out there? I mean, what is...
Well, greed will take over, and people will find a way, as greed
Right.
always does.
Right.
But you know, I was thinking last night, because your film stimulates a lot of thought, and I was thinking about the original, I mean, beyond Eisenstein and Lumiere, but you know, besides the geniuses that started, you know, when the nickel films that were made, that were so jumpy, but some wonderful ones were made.
Sure.
And then a more sophisticated way to film silent films came, and everything had to be rethought. And then, of course, sound came, and that was the end of many people's careers. And also, people thought that was the end of art in film. Many people that was the end of it. And then Technicolor came along, and that really changed Hollywood also, because there were some people who were not that photogenic in color. They were better in black and white. And that changed
We're
things
all
too.
better in black.
And a lot of people wanted things to say black and white. But it doesn't stop. I remember when I got out of art school, I worked in fashion for a short period of time. And my friends and I started, we just opened the store and started very radical clothing. And it was, we were just a little...
What's the name of that store?
Paraphernalia.
Nice.
And of course, the miniskirt had just sort of broken in London, right? And then of course, all of us and the other young designers I was working with, everything was that. But every other designer started doing it. We were just early because it was 1965, but by 1966 or 67, and I remember doing a radio talk show with a lot of people who were analyzing and discussing whether a miniskirt was like ruining women's morals, and it was so absurd. And where the radio station was, I finally just said, will you look out on the street? And there were grandmothers wearing miniskirts. So, you know, when I say the boat has sailed, the boat has actually always sailed. Because it has to. It can't go backwards. which doesn't mean you can't use things from, on Flatliners, Kiefer's first death experiment, the great Jan de Bont shot it. We didn't know how to give you an experience of that. So we used 70 millimeter color enhanced, 16 millimeter Super 8, video, a couple of other things, and we would have used someone using their their iPhone to film it. And by jumping all that together, it created something that was, we didn't know it would work, but we were hoping, and that it would give you something that
Otherness.
would help you. Yes, an otherness. Thank you. That's a great word. So,
So we're living in a time of otherness.
we are the otherness.
We're always the
We are
otherness.
those othernesses, right? And, well, let me ask you a few questions. Did you choose to shoot it on digital, or was it a budget concern?
It started with not a little bit of budget at the time. I mean, there is a kind of, especially in early days, you know, digital is always like, well, digital's cheaper. But as you scale it, oftentimes it doesn't pan out that way. But I was filming in mainland China and Beijing, and the producer had a little bit of concern about QC, in the sense of where we're going to develop the film in mainland China. What was the qualities of it going to be, and also just you know the film cost. Generally, film is around $1 a foot is how it's sometimes tracked, right, Charlie?
Yeah, that's about right.
So digital sometimes is tracked at like as a commensurate thing. What, 33 cents?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, you get rid of a lot of the cost, yeah.
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 So I was just trying to learn some technicolor.
Our friends.
Yes.
And so I had that. And so then I did some camera tests and shot some film, worked with a couple of digital cameras, and then working with the cinematographer, Elliot Davis, we spoke about it. And so I was I had a lot of pressure from the producer to investigate the digital side of it. And luckily I came up with a digital look that actually I was really happy with. Ended up using that camera, the studio camera, and working with some Hawk lenses, shot anamorphic. So it was sweet.
And you have a lot of intense action in your film.
Yeah, I had to look at motion blur and all
Yeah.
those things.
And did that work for you?
Yeah. I mean, I played with it just a little bit. I mean, I used the 90-degree shutter. Some of the action I tried to keep on the mechanical shutter.
Mm-hmm.
So that camera had an electric shutter in it.
It was flexible.
Yeah, it was flexible, and so I could use that.
How light was it for you?
I didn't have to carry it, thank God. But yeah, we got to move. We only used some Steadicam, a bunch of Steadicam, and we didn't have a bunch of toys to play with.
Mm-hmm.
But it was pretty basic. But we threw it around a lot.
And how long could you do a take for?
We were shooting up. We had the codecs. We were doing ProRes. I guess we had about, I want to say like 40 minutes, 20 something. Yeah.
One of the things that was brought up in your film was how precious film is. You know, the horror that someone screams out on the movie set is not "we're on fire" or the dog is sick. The worst words on the set are "film's still rolling," and it's hysteria because sometimes I get carried away directing and I forget to yell cut, and they're trained to not cut till the director says cut, and and then you hear "film's still rolling" and everyone panics because you just wasted money. And it's really nice not to have to hear that. Because it always runs out in the middle of the great take. It never runs out when everybody's fooling around. So it's great to just keep rolling and rolling and
Yeah, the editors love that. And we were filming today, and here's 8 hours of dailies from 6 cameras. Have fun.
That's their
It's
job.
in there somewhere. It's in there somewhere, yeah.
Yes.
There's digital cameras, and we just roll them all day. I think it's in there somewhere. If you could find it, that'd be great.
I always say to them, oh, your job is so hard. Why don't you go and shoot this?
I know everybody's got something to say
I know.
about it.
Well, I love the people last night that were talking about that old tactile feeling of film. And, this is how it used to work. All right, we have a piece of film, and let's say I had 5 close-ups of Keanu. To try each one, we have to cut it, and then it has to be pasted together, then we have to run it through, then we have to try the next one. And you're trying to remember the performances of all 5 of these. And it was unbearable, and it took forever. And the romance of that is really exaggerated, because I can now watch 15 takes of him in seconds in a scene, and just keep replacing in fact, you can even use parts of one and parts of the other so rapidly now. And you can work with the editor instead of being at the mercy of the editor. No, I'm talking old school.
Yeah.
But it's really important. It's flexible, and everybody who works in film has to be flexible now, the actors too. A lot of actors aren't prepared for a lot of takes. It's just that their job is so difficult.
Just say action, man. And don't forget to say cut.
I didn't include you in that.
Yeah. Going again.
I was going again.
Going again.
Going again. That Fincher. Going again. But I also have to say the reason he's doing it again and again, because we have wonderful actors, is the framing of people's heads. And yeah, he's so technical. He's really.
Well, then,
brilliant.
Yeah, I've heard sometimes some people lament that the digital age is getting rid of discipline.
That's very interesting.
Cinematic discipline. That you don't, I've even heard past couple, this might be the end of the cinematographer, in the sense of, we don't need that kind of thing.
Oh, I can't.
Someone else can do that, or, but yeah, the idea of discipline, the idea of aesthetic discipline, the idea that you're making different kinds of choices now that aren't necessarily what we would describe from a classical point of view, of having a rich understanding of aesthetics.
Well, I think that I would assume that happened when we were able to have, digital assist, and for the first time directors didn't have to wait for dailies, they could actually we could see what the operator saw. Where if the operator said, well, I think I may have clipped your nose, you would of course do it again, but then everyone can look at it. And if that's not so and it's a good performance, we can move on. But then I'm sure a lot of people said, well, who needs operators then? Anybody can do it. Right. And of course, we know that's not true.
No.
But yeah, I think there are always people who say everything was better the old ways. I had a great horse. And then these machines came along, and they're noisy and they're ugly.
Oh my.
And so I don't know. I have to always believe in. I think that I always feel that maybe we may move technology and maybe filmmaking and acting along a tiny bit in for instance in my career and my contemporaries, and then you and the Wachowskis, and then now all the much younger people that are coming along. Not that you're old, but but that they will move it. So I never doubt the imagination or inventiveness of the human being, and I think it will just look different or feel different, and there will always be nostalgia for the past. And there is no Technicolor noir film that feels like a black and white noir film. There just isn't, because part of the black and white was part of what was great about noir. But yet, there are really interesting noir films, and they're in color, and people try to be inventive with it. So I think that everything is a tool, and I think it's up to people who want to tell their story in a maybe more artistic way, or want to use whatever this little thing is in their hand to dream and put their stories on the screen that they have, in their fantasies that they have in their mind. The first year I came here, I was the president of the jury for the student films from all over the world. There were 33. It was amazing. It was amazing, because I knew they were made with very little money and by very young people, and they were amazing. And you didn't even know what they were using sometimes, because the stories were so good, and these were stories they really wanted to tell. And that always gives me hope. It really does. And there's still so many good movies that come out every year. How people see them is a very big thing. But I think we have to come to terms that film is going to be like music is now.
And in what sense? How we're listening to it, how we're making it, how it's organized, how it's sold, how
you don't have to go into a store, look through racks, find it, or it's sold out, or whatever you go through, that you can actually just order one song. Sometimes we all love just one song on an album. And I'm not saying that's better, but it is. But it is. And also you don't have to protect it very much. I remember when there's still people that have saved all their, long playing records, which you see for sale for like $1 now in the swap meet. In the swap meet. And where are they going to play this? I mean, what are they doing? And I think it's great, and if they want to put it on and have a great experience, and it's not scratched, and it sounds great, and of course the sound systems are so sensitive that, I don't know, I probably sound trashy, but I'm all for the future, Keanu.
the future is now.
You made a film on digital. I'm really looking forward to that. And, would you do it again?
Sure. But I still, I guess, because I grew up in it, I still would like to have that. Well, actually, I did. Recently, last year, I did 2 years ago, I did a film called Generation on Super 16 with no video assist. It was 22 days. And there was a certain freedom to that. There was a difference to it, in an odd way. There was no playback. It was, it was just, I don't know. But you can always have that experience. But it was cool to have.
Thailand that way, and it was great. We also had unknown actors, so we didn't have to have, huge trailers. We were shooting in
I miss those.
So, but we didn't have to have a lot of the
accoutrement,
fluff and fold that happens in order to make a film, and we didn't have a lot of technology working for us, and there was something very fresh. I have to say I got the idea, all of that, from Celebration.
Oh, yeah.
From the first Dogma film, and because I thought that the tools to tell that story were perfect.
Yeah.
What was it? I know Gus is here. I saw him somewhere today. Or I saw his picture for sure. Did you make My Own Private Idaho on 35mm?
Yeah.
But and it's great, and it's beautifully shot, and as you know, it's one of my favorite films, but that could also have been shot in another medium and have been used artistically.
Yeah.
It could have.
Absolutely.
I'm glad it wasn't, but I mean.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Should we take any questions? Should we take some questions?
Yes, a good story is a good story.
Okay, there's no questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I I agree very much that a good story is a good story, and I do not need a film without a story. However, there are certain stories that cannot be told without the visual, without the huge visual space that a very, let's say, you call it like a very disciplined aesthetic adds to the story. There are certain movies, like for example, a recent one called Drive. The story you can sum up in 2 sentences, and you need the aesthetics to make it worthwhile.
Can you hear her?
No.
She's talking about how film, a good story is a good story, but you need a certain aesthetic, and she's talking about the film Drive, which she said you can tell the story in 2 sentences, but that's not what the film is.
No.
Right.
And I'm not worried. I'm not worried that the good stories will disappear, but I'm worried that the people will disappear who have the visual, like the capability to tell a quiet and very strong visual story.
Is the microphone not working? Yes.
Yes.
Why don't you repeat your
I'll
last
repeat it
sentence?
really quick.
Please.
I understand that the story is the essence of the film, but I'm worried that the people who will be able to tell it so that the essence comes out in the story visually, because sometimes you only need, like, you need a very strong visual, the visual aesthetics need to be really pristine to bring out the story. And I'm worried about these people disappearing amongst all sorts of handheld action and whatever is technically possible today now.
I don't think it will disappear. No. I think creative people, the artists, Keanu can speak to this, will always find ways to, just like Drive. I mean, they thought a lot about how they were going to do that.
My question is, how are we going to preserve the digital film for the future? Because we don't have yet an answer for it.
Yes.
That's the answer.
But there will be an answer. You know, if they can keep films from the 1930s and 40s in these huge, cooled tombs, and they'll find a way. They will find a way. I mean, they have to.
I know that kind of goes into, I mean, that takes a certain amount of money. It takes, what is going to be the affordable way to do it? That, and I'm not talking about one generation.
Right.
Like, I mean, yes, you can print your digital photographs, right? You can print it. But I'm just wondering, you know, anyway, we don't know. I mean, there's DOTS, there's, pardon me?
Put it on film. Well, that's what I was
Well,
gonna
yeah,
say.
I know, but that's
What he's
not,
saying is
that's,
transfer it to film.
but it's, again, that's, you know, not everyone can do it, but how affordable is it?
It's expensive.
You know, scanners are faster, scanners are better, yeah, no.
I'm not sure movie studios value film the same way they used to.
Why do you think that is?
Excuse me, can I say something to that?
Oh, yeah, please.
Because you were very polite to everyone that you interviewed, and I thought it was astonishing how you got all points of views, really the cross-section. It was beautiful, it was wonderful. But I don't think you were hard enough about the people, this mystery of how it's going to be saved. There won't be CAMERIMAGE in 20 or 40 or 60 years' time if they figure it out. And you have to say to George Lucas, because he started it all, figure it out. You can't just make oxygen disappear. Oh, we're going to invent it. You're sending it down the pipeline. If they're going to throw away film and film cameras, figure it out before you throw away celluloid. You can't not give us the
not
option.
the way
And
humans
Nova,
work.
everybody's kicking it down the road. They're going to figure it out. If George Lucas hasn't put his money behind it, nobody's going to do it. Who are you going to ask? Bill Gates? They have, it's
Sure.
their responsibility to figure out archiving. They can't say, we're going to figure it out, because I've been to all those conferences, and you guys all, you're in the hub of it, in San Francisco, the technology, they haven't figured it out. And when they send files and movies, those editors are going to tell you, you know what, we lost it. It dropped out. It's not there. You can't do it. So they're covering their asses with the 6 cameras and the 10 cameras, but it's not working. You have something that's not working yet. And I think you should have been harder on them and said, hey guys, you figure this archiving thing out before we extinguish
That
film.
wasn't the discussion, though. He wasn't trying to
How can
nail.
you put away a medium? Just throw it away. Fuji's closed down, and we pray that some rich people will sign up for Kodak. But you can't throw it away until you've figured out how to
It has
archive
to be
it.
figured out. The first computer was the size of this room.
But you in your
You
film.
must remember
It has to
that.
happen.
Someone figured
Who's
it
gonna
out.
take the initiative
They
to
got
say
to the
we're
moon.
gonna figure this out?
They got to Mars. And, you know, someone will figure it out. There's a lot of
I
geniuses
don't
out
trust
there.
them. Look at our banking. Look at our whole structure of our society has gone into meltdown. Our banking system, our political system, everything else. This is another thing.
Oh, well, that's that's a whole other discussion.
Well, since we're there,
But
how about then, it doesn't, with all of this, you know, maybe there's I always wondered if there was like this kind of physical law, and that in some sense that with all of the content that's being created, that there has to be something in the natural process that's letting it be destroyed.
also, when you're that
And then
passionate
how
about
much
something,
how much do we treasure the image, and how much do we care
well,
about
that's
the
another
past,
discussion.
and how much do we just want to
We
be
live in a
present?
very disposable world.
And then maybe that's because of the apocalypse.
But when you're that passionate, there are people who are stocking up. They are. Have you seen those documentaries?
Oh,
of
yeah,
the people
sure.
that are ready for the whole thing. When you're that passionate about something, then you do it, and you start it. And Gotta get to the rock star.
No, this is very important because this CAMERIMAGE, and we've always discussed the art and the craft, the art and the technology, but they didn't banish oil paints or all those things, people looking at paintings, and now I live in Paris, so I go to museums where everyone's going to look at the 1800s and how the lenses were. It's so precious, it's so beautiful. I just worry that we're not going to be here in 100 years' time. We're going to see films up until now, and all these films made on digital, brilliant or not, they're going to disappear, they're going to vanish, and nobody's caring. Somebody has to care.
Yeah, you can donate to the Museum of the Moving Image, which is in Brooklyn, New York, and is constantly showing silent films, modern films, of course, but they are preserving as much as they possibly can. It's a great group of people, and they are dedicated to exactly what you were talking about. But Keanu,
Martin Scorsese says he comes to Cannes and he's got his foundation, but even people talking to him, how are you going to save Hugo? That's a work of art. How are you going to save it? You're not. It's
that's
like
up
the guy
to Marty.
said-
That is not up to us.
No. The guy was right. Those things coming
That's
out.
up to Marty completely. If you want to make that movie, and it is certainly visually a masterpiece, then you got to save it. I mean, it's not up to us to figure out how to save anyone's movie.
I think it is up to you. You and Keanu, you're so intelligent and you're so devoted that people like you have to steer the industry now and say, we want an answer to this archive.
Yeah, there's definitely a major conversation that's definitely happening with a lot of people. Okay, so,
Let's
but
change
yeah,
the
I mean,
subject.
it's true, yeah.
Let's change the subject. I'm a writer, and I would like you to talk about the choosing scripts. Yes?
A young lady who's a writer about choosing scripts. You mean how we choose them?
Yes.
Personally?
How do you choose them? Yes.
I think it always comes to one's taste. So it's generally if you find a story that you find intriguing or that moves you, and then to me it goes well. It starts with me for the story, and then to the character, and then to the people who are being put together to
But they
create.
come from your friends or from people?
Oh, you're talking about literally how do I get a
Does
script?
the
I get it
material
from-
come from his friends, she's asking?
You know, I've actually had scripts dropped off at my door, had them delivered. I've had some scripts from my from neighbors, and in Los Angeles, it's very easy to find a script. It's not so easy to get them made, but yeah, and then you get them from agents and managers. And the only thing they don't do is fall from the sky, but almost.
when I started out, even though my first 3 movies were very profitable, the third one being St. Elmo's Fire, I wasn't being offered anything I liked. And especially The Lost Boys, which was all children, and it was sort of a G-rated Disney cutesy movie, and I really needed the job. And I think that there are a lot of us that in the beginning, if you don't have money, if you're not subsidized in any way, I really, really needed the job. Then you have to figure out how you can make it your movie. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers went along with that, but I really needed that job, and I think of that often. And I'm sure, I don't know.
I think of it often.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of directors would say the same thing. That also, you must remember, some of these greatest films that we're talking about from the past, the studio made those directors and those actors do films they didn't want to make, which turned out to be some of the greatest American films. And, you know, that's important to remember. Michelangelo only thought sculpting was an art. He took the Sistine Chapel ceiling as a gig because he needed the money. So, you know, not every movie that we worship, that we relish, started out as we're going to make a masterpiece, we're going to make a movie for all time, we're going to, you know, this will. And certainly Hollywood in those days, when every studio was just knocking them out every second, they didn't know. They couldn't have known that these films were going to go on for, you know, years and years and years. So we can't get too precious all the time, but they must be preserved, and everybody who's saying that is absolutely right. But there's going to be too many people saying it, then that will, so it has to be done, because there'll be, you know, there won't be 2 or 3 people saying that. But it's a big, big, big thing, and money is always involved, and they have to find a way that by keeping them, they can make a profit someday, somehow, and that it's worth it to them. Because I'm not sure they'll just do it to have it.
Okay, Keanu, how did you choose the script of the Polish Man?
This is a script I developed, actually. Yeah, I worked on it for about 5 years.
Okay, I have a question for you as directors. Are you not afraid of the situation in the future, maybe in a few years, that they actually every story will be told already and you will find no other inspiration?
The young lady is asking if we're afraid in the future that every story has been told already.
There is something to that, in the sense of, you know, how can we entertain? What is entertaining? Or I think, you know, human life is, you know, always surprising, and we're confronted with, and maybe this is kind of what's cool about the visual aspect, or the way that we're viewing films now, is that there's different ways, but in terms of a traditional 2-hour window to tell a story, there's different ways now to do that. I don't think they'll be running out of situations, but certainly the literacy, at least in the West, the filmic imagistic literacy is at a very high level now. You know, when I'm talking, you know, in terms of the audience, say, now in mainland China, who's being exposed to so many more films, their imagistic literacy or their filmic storytelling literacy is different than yours. You know, for us, how do we tell a story now is different. You know, and how will we tell our stories? And I think, you know, we'll always be interested in love. You know, that one's pretty secure. And the flip side of that, porn is pretty secure.
Are we afraid that love will run out? That's
yeah.
But I would just like to say that novelists, essayists have not run out of stories yet either. And we also are, if you haven't noticed, we are raging narcissists. So we never get tired of watching human beings act out human things that we consider as human beings and relate to. So that's not going to go away. It's like saying, well, you know, will Ibsen go away, or will Shakespeare go away, or you know, will Mamet go away? It's, you know, they're not going to go away. It depends if someone grabs them and does them.
They might be forgotten.
They could be forgotten, but then that would be the saddest. But I
And then you
think
can start again. So through the erasure, you can have a renewal.
Yes, the Greek tragedies are not hot right now. This gentleman's had his hand up for a long time.
There's something to that, the digital is okay.
It kind of leads on from the last question. Do you think like the fact that DSLRs are so kind of like DSLR video cameras that everyone here has got them, like anyone in the world could potentially make a film now? Do you think in the next 5 to 10 years, like Hollywood pictures will start telling different kind of people's stories from all over the world, not just kind of what's been the mainstream in Hollywood for the last maybe 20, 30 years, but I mean stories that no one has told in major feature films might become, you know, the source of our entertainment. Just
You mean like Hollywood kind of gaining a world cinema kind of perspective?
or just like people's stories who've never had the chance to tell, because financially they've never been in a position
Oh, I
to
see
make
what you're
films or
saying,
even
yeah.
get anywhere near the industry. Now it's getting close, like, you know, you can make films with your phone and DSLR and stuff like that. Do you think that might?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, to answer your question, you want to do that? But I think Hollywood is now, with what Joel was talking about earlier about, in the sense that they're not making a mid-budget film anymore. They're kind of, the Hollywood business seems like it's becoming more about the special effect movie or the hero or action-oriented films, because in a way, that's what they can still do that other people can't do, the scale of that. You know, in terms of, and also financially, that's still a film that they can export and make, and, you know, so that's something that they can do. So it's even harder to get a big budget Hollywood drama told. I think Warner Brothers does one a year, like by mandate. You know, Fox, no. You know, 6 studios. I mean, it's so, and then they can do comedies, right? So, in terms of this idea of the cinema or storytelling opening up, I don't know. I don't think so. But to fill that in, there are a lot more American independent entities making films. So I don't know. I mean, definitely the tools are being appropriated. Again, like in the horror genre, the Paranormal Activity series coming out of the States. You know, that kind of reality-based, using that technology, that kind of filmmaking to tell a story. But in terms of the faces or I mean, Slumdog Millionaire, actually, into a certain way.
That's kind of one of the things that made me think about it.
Yeah, maybe that kind
But
of.
stories coming from the people who it's actually about, like they're the ones who are, they might not be directing or being, you know, DP or anything like that, but it'll be their, you know, force to.
Yeah, the studios have done things. The way that they have done that is actually, I mean, like, Fox International has done that, Warner's International. So there's actually money coming from the studios going into foreign investment to make indigenous stories. So as a business model, they have done that.
And they're all trying now with Asia, of course, China especially, that they would be films for the Chinese market, actually, with Chinese actors. I think I'm going to do one. I've been there a few times to that great studio they built. You know, the other thing is there's always been, since the 60s, sort of around the 60s and late 50s, there is this ugly sister syndrome in the mainstay of the American film establishment. And if you notice, every year when it gets to Academy Awards, a lot of the films that are nominated and win have been made by the artists, like The King's Speech, like La Vie en Rose, like, you know, that wonderful Polish film In Darkness that Agnieszka Holland made. You know, that they're not rewarding their own children very much. It's much more an appreciation for other countries' work, which can't be made in our country. They just can't be. They're too expensive, and you would need huge movie stars, and those films cannot be made. And there's a sensibility also that comes, as you know, with every country, with every mindset. And they're very honored in our country, and somewhat put on a pedestal. And a lot of them are quality films. So there's that strange ugly sister syndrome that it must be better because it's from England. They have accents.
All right, let's take one or two more. Yes.
Recently, I watched a film on a very well-known painter, Richter, and he made his paintings in very interesting ways. But then he puts those paintings on the wall, and he decides after a couple of days' time whether the painting is good or not. Now, and then he paints it white, and the painting is gone. Right? Now, when you think this is what we saw in Keanu Reeves' film today, is that digital cameras and this sort of way of making films becomes cheaper and cheaper. Do you think that directors of all sorts, great directors, or perhaps lesser known directors will have this sort of courage to destroy their films if they are becoming cheaper, that they would decide, okay, the film is no good, because there's this group of people involved, right? They're working on this film, but we also learn that it takes less and less time. The making of films becoming cheaper and cheaper, right? So do you think that the opposite might take place? That, people would decide, the film is no good, thank you, we'll destroy it.
Woody Allen did that one. He did. With a film called September. He shot the home movie and he hated it and he destroyed it. It's not, no one can ever see it. And then he recast it and shot it all over again. And that was in a period where he was very much subsidized and could do things like that. Times have changed. And I don't know, as far as we all have delete buttons on everything now. And sometimes we delete things accidentally. And I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer because it would depend on the individual, I would think.
Yeah, also painting is less of a collaborative art oftentimes than a movie. So you might want to go, this is terrible. And then the other person might go, what the fuck are you, what? You what? I'm gonna fucking kill you.
The difference is you can sit all your life and paint or do sculpture or do whatever form of art you want, and if it doesn't sell, you're the only one who suffers. We're expected, I don't care what anyone says, we're expected to use a terrible old Hollywood expression, to get some asses in some seats. That's kind of our job. And now with pay-per-view and certain other things, there are many other ways to make money with a movie, but it is show business. They're not there to subsidize our art. We like to think they are, but they don't think that way.
Excuse me, we have two more questions, okay?
It was a little bit about digital screening. What to think about it? You shoot something in 35mm, but you won't be able to screen it in 35 analog machine because in theaters in our country, for example, usually they change it to DCP format and we have to show it like that.
Yeah. So do you want me to elaborate on that, or what's the question?
What's your opinion about shooting?
Oh yeah.
Do you think you lose artistic view, artistic taste?
Why don't you say it in Polish to Andre?
In Polish.
What language is your first language?
Turkish, actually.
Do we have a Turkish interpreter?
Actually, one. When you shoot
Okay.
something in 35 millimeters, but you won't be able to screen it in the same format.
Yeah.
Do you think you lose your...
I see.
Yeah, absolutely. In the sense of, Charlie could probably talk about this better than I can.
Absolutely.
You want to do it?
I'll do it.
Charlie, come up. We love Charlie.
One of the things that happens when you transfer film is it transfers in video color space. And one of the big issues looking at film is you don't look at it in the same color space that film is projected as film, or the film is shown when it's shown digitally, emulating film. So one of the big problems that we're having right now in the age that we're in with digital cinema, including in the production process itself, is what are we going to emulate when we look at what we shoot on film? Because like you're saying, what do you lose? What you're losing is the color values that you look at in HD color space are not the same as what you see when you look at film. So you're not looking at the same product when you're evaluating it in production. We do have the ability to apply film emulation when we're transferring to get close, to improve that process. But the big question is, to shoot forward, is the gold standard, and part of what Keanu's film Side by Side was about, when you think about it, is we have set the industry standard for exhibition as film, projected. We're following film. When film goes away, what do we follow?
When was the moment that you want to ask Charlie a question?
You have a follow-up question?
Can I ask a selfish question now? We have a screening here, and it's an HD cam. We shoot it in 35 millimeters without a lot of sacrifice, and it's a 4-minute shooting. Can we have influence that we can be able to show it in 35 millimeters in this festival?
In the festival?
Yeah, we have a screening
Here?
Here, yeah. And we shot it in 35 millimeters, but they don't allow us to show it in 35. And
He would have to have it transferred to 35 millimeters.
we brought it with us, so if you can have influence on the committee.
I'm lost. Next question.
No, wait. Okay, it's a sidebar. He wants to show his movie in 35.
Oh, you want to show your movie in
Yeah.
35?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so
That's not up to us.
It's already screening.
I think you have some
When is it
influence.
screening?
It's in 30th. In the
Okay.
It's in 30th.
And how are they going to show it? Not 30.
HD cam. They made us to transfer the whole thing to
Oh, I'm
HD
so
cam.
sorry. I didn't know what you were filming.
So we brought
What's it
like
called?
35 minutes. It's Road to London. It's a
Route 1?
Road to London.
Road to London.
Yes, correct.
You got to see Road to London.
Okay, I'm going to a couple of things. Okay, so I'll get back to that. See if we can get a film projector to do the thing. Is that the only thing that he would lose in terms of, like, other than following the color space? When you're going, I'm talking about in the best case scenario, how much of my image am I losing when I'm going through a 2K projector? Once I've scanned my print and I've got a 2K projector that's going to go in right now a traditional DCP.
Well, I think the idea is that the idea is that everyone gets obsessed with resolution. So let's just throw that out the window right now, because that's ridiculous. Resolution is going to keep going up as being able to manage that becomes more capable. When you look at the image and you see something that follows a film standard, so if you were looking at the same film projected on film and then the same film projected digitally, you could say that DCP follows film color space. The Academy right now is working on a new standard called ACES. One of the reasons why the Academy is working on ACES is because film is going away. So who do we tip our hat to, right? In other
Yes.
words, what are we going to follow? Are we going to follow some type of variable color space, or are we going to set an industry standard for looking at things theatrically that we have to reach when film goes away? What are we going to emulate? So I mean, resolution apart, technology apart, which is only going to grow. The bigger deal is that we do have the technology to be faithful to film color space with digital cinema, which is great. What we don't have is, as film goes away, what is the new standard going to do to tip its hat to the aesthetic of film that we remembered and loved?
That is the question.
I have one question. Very last one. Yes, okay.
Last question.
So,
That'll be good.
so you made side by side. Don't you wanna make more films? For example, video clips like David Lynch. Did you think about it?
The question is, does he want to make video clips also, besides doing his, well, he did his first feature and the documentary. He was a little occupied.
You know, who knows what will happen. I think I was really fortunate, and you know, you need to have a story to tell. And so I was really lucky to have been able to have this question of where are we today, where are we going in terms of this relationship between the gold standard of film and digital and the audience and filmmaking. And I'm very fortunate and happy that I was able to have the experience of making that film and to show it here and to make it here. So thank you for that.
So all is possible.
And all is possible. And I don't know if I'll be doing video clips, but you never know. I might be inspired. But so for me, Joel, thank you very much for taking the time.